Welcome back to part 2 of my explainer on Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness policy, where 43 million borrowers will receive up to $20,000 in debt relief. First and foremost, how much is this all going to cost?
How much will this cost? How much will Americans have to pay on this price tag overall?
Well, that remains to be determined, and it will be a function of what percentage of eligible borrowers actually take up this opportunity.
300 billion?
We'll see when they take up the opportunity. We'll be able to give you a much better sense
but are
of
those
that.
Numbers ballpark at this point?
I think it depends on the numbers.
So Susan Rice, the director of the Domestic Policy Council, can't tell you how much it's going to cost because it all just depends.
Like, unfortunately, and we're here to encourage as many people to take it up as possible. If 43 million borrowers take it up, that'll be different than if 50% of those 43 million take it up.
If it is 43 million, if I could just follow on, if the full number of eligible borrowers do take advantage of the program, what would the cost be?
I can't give you that off the top of my head.
So she comes to a press briefing to answer questions about the so-called debt relief and doesn't have a clue about how much it's going to cost? Yeah, I'm not buying it either. And we get the same story from director of the National Economic Council, Bharat Ramamurthy.
So the first question is, what's the cost? And as Ambassador Rice said, there's a number of factors that go into that question. There's the take-up rate. Our hope is that 100% of people who are eligible go apply for relief and get the relief that they're entitled to. I think realistically we're not going to get to 100%, but the question is, how far short of 100% are we going to be? And that plays a big role in what the cost is going to be.
The plan is that every borrower will take advantage of loan forgiveness, yet they don't know how much it's going to cost? Well, the short answer is they actually do know. The Penn Wharton budget model estimates that forgiving federal college student loan debt will cost between $300 billion and $980 billion over a 10-year budget window. So with that said, the White House is going to do everything it can to avoid admitting that the cost could be as much as $1 trillion.
About the student loans, how can the country afford such a massive handout?
Look, if you look at what this president has done, if you look at the end of this coming end of the fiscal year, $1.7 trillion that we have deduced, brought down the deficit. That matters. That matters.
Oh, look who's back from vacation.
And that matters. That matters. That matters. Which is going to matter. That matters. That matters as well.
Anyway, Little Miss Matters is not answering the question, which was, who is paying for it? Instead, she's pointing to deficit reduction, which has nothing to do with paying for anything. As you should know, a deficit occurs when a government spends more money than it collects in taxes. For example, in 2020, the federal deficit under President Trump was a massive $3.1 trillion. And this is primarily because of COVID spending. The next year under Biden, the deficit was nearly $2.8 trillion. And since the deficit was $350 billion less than the previous year, the Biden administration claims that it cut the deficit by $350 billion. But the reality is that nothing was cut. All this means is that less was spent in 2021 than was spent in 2020. But for some reason, the White House looks at the deficit and treats it like it's money in the bank.
And if you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, it's going to add another $300 billion, is going to bring down the deficit again.
It would be nice if the White House spokesperson could actually speak, but whatever. Anyway, Karina's trying to say that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to bring down the deficit by $300 billion. But this is very misleading, because this deficit reduction of $300 billion is over a 10-year period and doesn't kick in until 2027.
And you might spend $300 to $900 billion extra, so you can do that and not
but here's the thing.
deficit.
Here's the thing. What we are trying to do here, we are doing this responsibly. And you think about what Republicans did just a couple of years ago. They signed off on a $2 trillion tax cut for the wealthy and did not provide any way to pay for that.
Karine is referring to the 2017 Trump tax cuts and claiming that they weren't paid for. And, you may recall that Democrats like Nancy Pelosi called it the GOP tax scam. But the data shows that they're lying. I know you're shocked. Tyler Goodspeed and Kevin Hassett, economists who both worked in the Trump White House, explained that the tax cuts worked exactly how they were designed. When the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed, we were criticized for being overly optimistic about the effects we predicted it would have. Now that the evidence is in, our critics were wrong, and the economic data have met or even exceeded our predictions. Though growth in business investment had been slowing in the years leading up to 2017, after tax reform, it surged. By the end of 2019, it was 9.4% above its 2017 trend, exactly in line with the prediction of our models. And I should point out that in fiscal year 2021, corporate tax revenue hit an all-time high of $372 billion. And earlier this year, it was predicted that it would be even higher in fiscal year 2022, where corporate tax revenue would hit $454 billion. In other words, the Trump tax cuts paid for themselves. And because the tax cuts were pro-business, Democrats hate it. But they're also going to lie that the tax cuts didn't help the middle class or people with lower incomes.
And just because I've seen some criticism from Republicans on this today, it's instructive to compare that to what the Republican tax bill did in 2017. It's basically the reverse. 15% of the benefits went to people making under $75,000 a year, and 85% went to people making over $75,000 a year. And if you zoom in even more on that, people making over $250,000 a year got nearly half of the benefits.
Of course, people making over 75 grand a year benefited more, because people that make more money pay more in taxes. Let me explain. Say that this woman made $30,000. Her top tax rate in 2017 would have been 15%, and her total tax bill would have been $2,474. But in 2022, her top tax rate dropped, and she only has to pay $1,895. She benefited and saved $579. Now let's say that this man made $200,000 in 2017. His top tax rate would have been 33%, and his tax bill would have been $46,070. In 2022, he would have only had to pay $40,811. He benefited and saved $5,259. So of course Democrats always demonize people who make more money and claim that they're being treated better than the poors. But keep in mind that the person who made $30,000 only paid 6.31% of their income, while the person who made 200 grand paid 20.4%. But sure, those privileged rich people get all the benefit or whatever. And to say that the middle class didn't benefit from the Trump tax cuts is a big fat lie. Compare these income tax brackets from 2017 and 2018. Essentially, if you're a single filer that made more than $9,525 a year, your marginal tax rate decreased, which means benefits all around. Furthermore, Americans got a raise. Goodspeed and Hassett point out that in 2018 and 2019, real median household income in the US rose by $5,000, a bigger increase in only 2 years than in the entire 8 years of the preceding recovery combined. And the preceding economic recovery was the one that President Obama put Vice President Joe Biden in charge of overseeing. And it turned out to be the slowest and weakest economic recovery since World War II. Not a joke, folks. So the Biden administration is lying about the Trump tax cuts, but they would never lie about the current state of the economy, right?
And of course, if you look back to some of the data releases a little bit earlier, for July, we had 528,000 new jobs. CPI, which came out in July, that was flat, so no price increases in July.
Except that from June to July, the price of food at home was up 1.1%. Dairy products rose 1.7%. Coffee rose 3.5%. Juices rose 2.3%. Cereals and bakery products rose 1.8%. Meats, poultry, fish, and eggs rose 0.5%, and fruits and vegetables increased 0.5%. But no
price increases in July.
And of course, they're gonna lie and say that the so-called debt forgiveness is paid for.
Who is paying for this?
What we are saying is the work that this administration has done, the work that the Democrats in Congress has done is actually there, and you see that the 1.7 trillion deficit deduction that you see is going to benefit us in being able to do something for the middle class, to do something for the middle class.
Oh, I see. Shifting hundreds of billions of dollars of debt to middle-class taxpayers is a benefit. Got it. Then there's the issue of future student debt, because the new proposed rules from the Department of Education make it easier for borrowers to take on debt without worrying about having to pay it back in full. And since the federal government is guaranteeing these loans, colleges and universities are very likely to raise tuition costs and fees because they can. But don't worry, Susan Rice says that it's not going to happen because of Biden's American Rescue Plan or something.
The American Rescue Plan provided both in state and local funds, as well as in funds targeted to higher education, significant dollars that can and should be used to make sure that public institutions don't increase their tuition and expenses greater than the rate of inflation.
She's specifically talking about public institutions when the issue of very high tuition is largely with private institutions. Furthermore, the federal government has no jurisdiction over what public or private colleges and universities charge.
The Department of Education is going to be vigilant. They are going to publish annually a list of institutions that are the worst actors in terms of the delta between what they promise, what they charge, and what they deliver.
Oh, I see. Colleges and universities are going to keep their tuition down because if they don't, the government's going to get mad and shame them. Get real.
What prevents the cycle of debt from continuing? Right? Because there will be students, no doubt, this coming year who are going to take on more loans. And I guess I'm still confused as to how the cycle of debt is really broken.
I mean, when you think about, and this was in our fact sheets, which I think is really important to state, is how much relief this will provide to 43 million borrowers, including canceling full remaining balance for roughly 20 million borrowers. Like, that matters.
So Asma Khalid's question was about the next generation of borrowers, and Karine Jean-Pierre is like, we're canceling debt for millions of past borrowers. It's in our fact sheet, stupid.
That matters.
But what actually matters is the fact that we've been told for years that there is a student loan debt crisis, and currently there is $1.75 trillion in outstanding debt. Back in July 2022, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget asked the question, how long before canceled student debt would return? They estimated that if every borrower was given $10,000 of debt relief, outstanding debt would return to current levels in just 4 years' time. In other words, canceling student debt for previous generations does not solve the problem for future generations because the cycle of debt is allowed to continue. And you can't just snap your fingers and make the debt disappear.
That matters to borrowers and their family.
Who are in high school right now going in, it's sort of like no solutions for them.
Well, look, I think what you're talking about, the future. Is that what you're talking about? You're talking about? Okay.
Are you kidding? Yeah, we don't think about the future ramifications of our actions. We're gonna leave that for the next administration. Anyway, that's it for now. Be sure to hit that like button, check out these videos that you may have missed, and be sure that you're still subscribed to the channel. A special thanks to Poofy for her help with this week's script, and as always, I hope to see you next time. If there is next time.